sent it to him before, and I think I said,
I see what you're saying.
I think I said if we were hiking,
yeah, you're right. I did.
I think I said if we were hiking this morning, this is what we'd be talking about.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
And it was just here's what I was thinking this morning when I got up or whatever.
I love it that your brain works like that.
I can't turn it off.
I think it's awesome. I really do. I wish I had more complex thoughts than that.
So does your start with that?
I'm sleepy. I want to take a nap.
Is that your notes? Where does it start?
What?
Is that how this conversation starts? Is that what's on your notes?
Yeah. Basically, there's two questions, and there's kind of a third one in there. But yeah, basically we start with Heifetz Grashow, I don't know how to say his last name, and Linsky, in the practice of adaptive leadership. The question that they ask is, at what level in your organization do people begin to feel and act as if they are valued more for their judgment than for their technical expertise? And it's been one of those things that I've been asking people in our department. What do you think of this? Where do you think that breakover is? And it's not where we only value you for your judgment and not technical. It's not a one or the other. It's that 51% judgment, 49% technical expertise. It could be as close as that, but it is a more. So at what level in the fire service do you think the organization starts to value judgment from that person more than technical expertise?
And this is...
I just don't know if it's at a level.
I would, if I was going to be very generic about it, I would give it a level. And for my experience, I'd see between captain is technical, battalion chief becomes more judgment-based.
Okay.
But it's also individual, because I have individual battalion chiefs that I do not trust their judgment or their technical ability.
No, but,
same thing with captains.
But if you were saying that the rank,
that's why I said being very, very general.
Yeah, what we expect out of a rank, because you're going to have captains that have great judgment.
Right.
You're going to have driver or engineers that have great judgment. But as far as what we expect and what the organization should hold you accountable for, kind of, you know what I mean?
I think what's throwing me off on the level piece is I'm getting it down to a call, right? Okay. And that this, and let's say it's a technical call, like it's a hazmat or a technical rescue or high angle, whatever. And I'm looking at someone who has a lot of technical expertise, and we are asking them what their judgment is on how we deal with this particular incident.
Right.
It didn't really, I don't know if the level piece got there for me. I'm like, I'm on this scene. It's a very technical scene. I'm looking at this technical expert who also has experience at what I have experienced, good judgment, which is another piece to that, because you could be technically, experienced and high level and still have some bad judgment.
Right.
So I don't know. I think I'm dissecting the original question too much.
I think you're filtering it through your own personal look at it as well, versus like the look at it as, like you're saying, general for the department.
Now, if I'm Bill, who's a deputy chief, and we're looking, the department as the fire chief is looking at Bill to make decisions for the organization in a particular area, is he looking for his judgment or his expertise, or is he looking for some blended version?
Well, and I mean, I still have technical expertise. It's
pretty high level too, by the way.
But it's not, I don't know how to pump one of our engines now. I did.
You could figure it out.
Well, but I did at one point. I had that, but I don't have it anymore. But I've got expertise in other non-firefighting smoke.
But you have a general knowledge of it, so it's enough that you could see. You could see judgment wise where you'd be like, "That's probably not the best way to do that.
Right.
It's probably not good to throttle it up before you put the water in it, kind of thing." So your judgment would lean further on one side, right? But you still have enough expertise to see if somebody else is doing it right.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think so. But I kind of agree with you, Hatch. I think battalion chief is kind of where we in the organization look to say
where we
expect you to have really good judgment here,
Yeah, now we're starting to put a little context to the
That's not to say, again, that captains can't have great judgment and be valued for their judgment. Right.
But at that level in the organization, when you're fixed in that level in the organization, we are looking
I'll put it
at
a
your
different
judgment.
way. If you're a battalion chief and you don't have good judgment, you're kind of a disappointment.
You might not be there long.
Well, but you're not living up to what we expected, And I do think the captains really are that technical expertise because they still have to master those things on scene. And I say this all the time, and I don't know if people agree with me or not, but fire scenes will run fine without a battalion chief on the technical side, because the technical aspects of it, the captains and the crews know. The battalion chief is not there because there's some technical piece that has to. The battalion chiefs are there as a coordination.
I was going to say coordination and judgment.
Right. And in our department, where we insert a battalion chief into a certain kind of call is not really about the call. It's more about how many pieces of apparatus and people are going to be responding to this, and how does it need to be coordinated.
Comes back to a coordination piece.
Yeah,
exactly.
And a communication link to it. Yeah.
Right. But there's still, there are those calls that I've never seen this before as a captain. And maybe the battalion chief has some experience, and we're not saying
you made me think the good judgment might be listening to the captain based on their technical experience.
Yeah.
It's not you trumping them.
100%.
As a battalion chief, I was not a hazmat tech, but I would command hazmat scenes and listen to the hazmat techs.
Right.
And using your judgment, their analysis had to make sense to you.
Exactly.
But we also, I think it needs to be said that our departments that we're talking about, mine and the two that you guys came from and used to be at, are similar.
Yes.
Similar in scope. Some places, the captain is actually going to be more like a battalion chief or a lieutenant. So it's not specific, but it's let's put it less of as a role, but maybe as the duties.
Yeah,
when you're having to come in and command a scene and be in charge of it, that's where we're looking for the judgment part.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
but I would suggest anybody in any department needs to ask this question of their department. At what point in our organization do we look to people more for judgment?
Right.
Because if you're looking for it, then how are we building that judgment? How are we?
I was going to say, what's the foundation of what judgment is?
Right.
Is it the gut?
Is it
intuition?
So I did a lot of reading on this before the listeners.
At least one of us did.
The listeners,
I didn't know what we was going to talk about.
Well, and that's the thing. The listeners need to know. With this one, we've truly just kind of thrown up there, and we didn't have any kind of plan. But those
are my favorite.
I did do reading, trying to come up with a plan, and I Googled everything I could think of about judgment. And there's a lot written, but it's not really this. It's not how do you arrive at judgment? How do you hone judgment? And I think, Shane, what you said years ago with the Hal Moore thing, and he's talking about gut instinct and how you build instinct. But here, I think that's really what we're talking about is judgment. And the reason that I say that is kind of the second question to this question, which is if technical expertise is about what you know, then is judgment more about being able to make a decision with what you don't know?
I have such a hard time with that.
Hold on with this one, because I got to do this. I got to do this for Babel anyway. Judgment definition.
You're going to get all kinds.
I'm just going to go with the first one that popped up because it's kind of interesting. The ability to make considered decisions or come to a underlined, sensible conclusion.
Right. But I mean, like, take this as an example, math. And I'm not talking about complicated math. I'm just talking about
basic.
2 + 2 = 4.
Those are my favorite.
Is there any judgment applied in doing 2 + 2 = 4?
I would say no.
Because it's all known.
Right.
But if you get into the more complicated math where there's unknowns and you had to make judgments about things, is it really more about being able to make that decision factoring in what you don't know.
Man, that is a really solid argument right there, because I was so against this until you just said that. And I was like, dang, that's a great point.
But at the same time, that right there, if you continue down the complicated math problem, yeah, because there's some unknowns that you're trying to figure out in this, there's still some technical expertise that is required to travel through the...
We're not throwing it away.
So I don't know that I could uncouple it.
That's a great
one or the other.
So you're filtering the unknowns through your known...
Exactly.
Your technical expertise.
Right, through your technical.
So if you don't have the technical expertise, it's really hard to have good judgment.
Right. And come out with a good answer. Or the right answer.
So how about...
Wait, we're getting way too close to having some right answers here. This is not us. This is not what we do.
I was just going to ask, what's the question again?
I think you're talking about experience.
Yeah.
And if your experience is based on what you know because of what you have experienced, what part of your experience is acknowledging what you don't know, what you haven't encountered? You see what I'm saying? When we talk about experience, we think about what we have experienced. But how often do we bunch in with that how much we don't know? And I was using the example right before we started this about climbing a mountain. Let's say it's Everest, and I think there's like 6 or 7 routes up Everest. You've done 3. I've climbed Mount Everest 3 times. As far as experience goes, most people are going to say, you're experienced.
Right.
But in reality, I haven't been up 4 of those routes.
But I'm going to push back on that, because the education piece, what you read, what you know, what you learn, plays into your experience. And hear me out, because learning that or reading what about someone else's journey, you start to create slide decks in your head.
Sure.
So you can't, just because you haven't necessarily
walk those steps.
I agree with what you're saying, but what Hal Moore said about gut instinct was, it was a and I've got to
that down.
Yeah, I had to write it down because I
we
never
always
can
forget
get it right.
one of them.
Yep. He said your instinct is built on your reading, your education, your personality, and your experience. And I think in that instance, what you're talking about is what he says is reading, and that's different than experience.
And education.
Correct. But what you're talking about on learning from other people is a piece of instinct, but it's not necessarily the experience piece.
No. Well, because even Hal Moore is not giving one weight over the other. He may have that we will never know that.
I think he was weighting reading first. That's my personal.
But that's just because of the way you like to read bullet points. But we don't know how he weighted it. So at this point, we just have to assume it's an equal combination.
Right. Okay.
It'd be interesting, though, if that was true or not, if it was an equal combination.
So would you say, back to judgment, and this is what hit me as I was mulling this over, and I literally was about to climb into bed and had to get back. I had to go back to my phone.
What a visual.
And write this down before I forgot it. Is judgment... Should we say that technical expertise is knowing how to do things, and judgment is knowing when to do things?
I think that's easy to say, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I think that to me makes sense. Yeah. Judgment is knowing when. But going back to judgment, because I really like this conversation and about what develops judgment. If we're saying that judgment is some level of intuition and gut,
right?
Where does personality come in? And can you develop that, or is that a woven piece?
That's an interesting question.
And if it takes up, how many pieces were there to intuition again? 4 or 5? 4. Okay. So if each one is worth 25%, and one you may or may not be able to control at all,
right?
It is what it is.
Which is one. Which is what? Which one? Can you
personality?
You can't control your personality.
I don't know.
Well,
I think some people can, but it might not be your personality.
Can you change your personality? You know, if I'm not an outgoing person, can I make myself into an outgoing person?
I think you can perform to some level and adjust the percentage of it, but I don't know that you can give it the full.
Or let's put it a different way. If I'm not naturally curious.
Ooh, don't like to pick at the cracks.
Right. So if I'm not naturally curious, can I become curious? Can I make myself curious?
I don't, not fully.
Can you have good instinct with only 75% of those things?
That's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Can you have I think you probably could have decent judgment, right?
Yeah.
I guess where I always go with this, what if you had good judgment, like really good judgment, but you're such an asshole, nobody wants to hear it? Oh, that's not where I was going. Hatch raised his hand, but that's not where I was going. But we come across people in our lives where you kind of see what they do, and because we've gotten to know them, we can get past that piece.
Right.
But what if you don't know them and you can't get past that piece and you've missed this good judgment?
Yeah, the personality turns you off
Totally
from the
messed
whole
it
rest
up.
of the 25%.
Shut the 75%
down. Yeah,
Right.
That's a good point. And I think that happens quite a bit. I mean, we've met people like this.
Yeah, I think it does happen quite a bit.
Yeah. It's about that communication, the delivery. I like too that y'all keep going back to Hal Moore. Like that's the benchmark for the gut. Like, was he using judgment? Could he be wrong about any of this?
No, but what I think Hal Moore is such a great example because he was a soldier's soldier. He was the first boots on the ground in the Yadrang Valley. He was the last boots to get back on the helicopter when they de-asked the area before they came back in the next days after that. But, I mean, he was that guy. He was standing in the middle of all of it,
right?
And
bullets whizzing.
He had a good way to communicate.
Right.
Also, like his book, in my opinion, it should be like required reading as an officer. Like it nearly
Hal
is
Moore on
step
leadership
by
is what he's
step.
talking about.
Well, and that's the other part I was going to say is it the first time that you've run across an explanation for it
That makes
sense, right?
Yeah.
That you
Right,
like.
that I
he,
could relate
he
to.
is that guy who people would look at and go, "Oh, I want to be like that." And then he talks about instinct, and his thing is, this isn't something that I was blessed with. It wasn't something that I just felt we should do. You know,
He's saying he developed it.
And it was a purposeful thing that he built over years, so that when he ended up in that situation in the Yadrang Valley,
Right.
he was able to deliver for the men that he was commanding, you know?
And he wanted to pass that information on. Like he
Right.
knew this would be beneficial to others. But what if his personality had not been that?
Yeah. Well, but the personality piece, and I'm just now realizing this, the personality piece, and Colin Powell says this, but, you know, if you're not good, I think he used the word pastor. He said if you weren't good with being a pastor to people around you, then you needed to have somebody close to you on your team that did that thing.
Meaning serve, protect.
And so Hal Moore had, and I can't remember his name, but it's the Sam
Yeah.
Elliott character. He's got that guy with him, and he's got, you know, he's built this team of whatever I'm not necessarily good at, maybe with personality. Here are the people that
Bridge the gap
yeah,
for me.
I don't know, but I do like the Hal Moore thing because I think he's that guy that he is just.
Well, I was just thinking I wonder if there's anything else out there, you know, other than that
Sure.
we just haven't run across yet, you know, that I would be
Absolutely not. We know everything.
right. But I mean, and I agree with it. I like it a lot, but we do bring it up
Right.
quite a bit. And I'm just curious if anybody else has run across another explanation of it, of building
Right.
your gut, your instincts, or something like that, because I think it is a very important part, especially for your judgment. How do you develop that?
Right. So Adam Grant said about judgment, he says, the curse of knowledge is that it closes our minds to what we don't know. Good judgment depends on having the skill and the will to open our minds. Yeah. And I think that's what Hal Moore's kind of talking about.
I think that's
Is that from Think
foundational.
Again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we should enter into every situation considering what I don't know about this situation.
So again, I'm back to, is judgment about what you don't know?
I think it's about considering what you don't know at the minimum,
Okay.
and that there is more, potentially more out there.
I think the easy, and I'm making wild, crazy statements at this point, I think the easy decisions are about what you know. The hard decisions are when you start to factor in what you don't know. Because 2 + 2 is 4, and it's 4 all day long.
Yeah, that goes back to what I talk about. You know, sometimes we go to a scene, I don't know how to land the plane.
Exactly.
I'm basically doing what I think is going to work.
Exactly. And
Never
you're
landed
using,
it
and
right
you're
here.
using your
Right.
judgment.
I've never seen this scene
terrain,
before.
right.
I don't know how this works, but I'm going to put this in place and this in place. I'm going to watch how that works. If it's going in the good direction,
We're gonna
I'm
keep
going
doing
to
it.
keep doing it. Maybe do a couple other things, but it's about judgment.
It is. And when to do it and when not to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know,
That's a good point on judgment, buddy. It's kind of that, what was the OODA loop?
Yeah. OODA loop.
yeah.
Observe, orient,
Decide,
act.
act. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then do it all over
And
again.
do it all. It never stops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody asked me, was like, how do you do that? How do you deal with the stress of it? And I'm like, I've never thought about it like that.
It is just the thing.
It's just the thing.
Right.
I always go into it knowing there's a good chance I've never seen this before.
Well, and I always went to it I shouldn't say I always did it. I still do. I always go into those decisions knowing I'm going to screw this up. At some point, I'm going to make a mistake in this.
That's a pretty defeatist way of looking
Well,
at it.
I'm going to be honest with you. I probably...
But I mean, when you realize that, it takes off the stress of if I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to make a mistake. Yeah. Now I'm hoping it's a small one, but I'm going to make a mistake at some point during this. And when it happens, I'm going to admit it and go, well, let's change this because that wasn't the right thing.
I'll be honest. I don't really think about wins or mistakes. I'm not really thinking about it like that.
No, but I mean, you were talking about stress. That's the thing that takes the stress out of it for me.
Well, I mean, I'm not even thinking about stress. I mean, I'm not even anything like that. I did have one that I rolled into, and it was a pretty chaotic looking scene. And I'm walking down thinking, I'm like the third chief to show up. This ain't my problem. I'm going to be like staging or something like that. And I was kind of laughing. I was like, God, I'm glad I'm not in charge of this one. And literally, he put me in charge as soon as I got down there. And I was like, oh, God. Now I got to come up with something.
I've never landed this plane.
Yeah, I was like, the street's on fire. Well, I've never seen the street on fire before.
Well,
don't hit me with a well so
no,
early.
that was a well in my mind, not a closing well.
But I don't know, have a hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that your judgment is about what you don't know.
I don't think it's completely about that.
I think it's about the filtering of what you don't know through what you do know.
What I'm saying, I guess, when I say that is that you have to. That's what the judgment piece is that we need you to filter through what we do know, through what we don't know,
right,
and then make a decision.
Let me ask you this, Bill. How do you get better at judgment? Like, how do you improve judgment?
Well, Colin Powell, and I've got to think about this because I mess it up every time. He says, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment.
But he asked you what you thought, not
but
what Colin Powell
yeah,
thought.
because what I'm doing is
I think it's experience.
I'm thinking about you're sitting
experience.
here with an individual that you've seen make bad decisions,
right?
Poor judgment, and you say to this person, I need you to use better judgment.
Right. So,
and that person turns around and goes,
how do I do that?
What does that mean?
All right. So I don't know that I can teach you, but I think the biggest thing is being open to realizing, number one, that you're going to make mistakes, acknowledging the mistakes, and then figuring out how not to do that again. We had a fire, and it was in one of those neighborhoods where the houses are on top of one another, and this thing is burning up. There's no putting it out. We are completely defensive, and all we're trying to do is keep the house on the left and the right from catching on fire.
You're still going to put it out.
It's going to run out of fuel eventually.
It will, eventually. So I asked for a master stream on the AD corner, which was not that far. I mean, there wasn't a lot of space between the road and the house. You know what I mean? So the driver of the engine that I wanted him to pull it from once everything calmed down, he's got something like 500 feet of hose in this pile at the back of the engine. Now, where I wanted the master stream was less than 100 feet from his pump panel. And I asked him afterwards, I went up to him and I said, how do you think this fire went? And he said, great. I don't think it could have gone better.
At all?
Yeah. And that's where I'm like, holy crap. Now that's a problem. I don't know what to do about that because you're not willing to even go, yeah, maybe I should have pulled all off I mean, He didn't hook it up, but he pulled it off the truck. At one point in his decision making, he was like, we need all this hose. So I don't know how to teach that. I don't know how to teach that ability to say, I made a mistake and here's where I'm going to learn from it. other
That's
than to
probably
say
the personality piece that
maybe so.
Completely
I mean, if I pointed it out to him, and I'm sure I did.
I'm sure you
Sure,
did
I
too.
said something about, well, maybe we don't need this much hose next time. You were only going over there. But yeah, if he's not receptive to that, if he's not going to put that in his experience and move forward, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because it brings up something I always talk about, especially for battalion chiefs. The ones that act like they don't have any more to learn, they've got this all figured out, are the ones that scare me.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Absolutely.
Because I think because there's always going to be the unknowns, just like you said. And so I think that your judgment has stagnated. Your level of judgment is going to stagnate because you think you've got it all figured out. And so you can filter it all through whatever you've already gotten.
I have arrived.
I've seen everything. There is nothing that's unknown.
Right. And I'm always like, I can learn something from the guy's very first day. He's going to have eyes and a perspective on this I have never thought of.
Right.
And I'd watch these guys be super arrogant and be like, there's nothing a rookie could teach me. You're wrong.
Right.
So I'm always trying to have that student outlook on whatever I go into.
All a student is somebody that acknowledges that there's stuff they don't know.
Right.
And they want to learn it.
Right.
So again, I go back to his judgment more about the unknown.
Well, judgment is definitely a lot more about personality than I thought about. 'Cause in both ways, in being able to deliver your judgment because your personality may shut it down, and being able to be receptive to it because you need to have the right personality and mindset already of that I need to be a student about this.
Right.
Luckily, my personality is awesome.
It is awesome.
I'm just kidding.
Again, on
There's
the record,
so many
that's
people
not who
that
I
don't
was
say
talking
that.
about.
How many people would be against that? Ugh.
We didn't come to any
Oh,
conclusion
no.
in that.
Not a
moment.
bit. Not a bit.
Like,
And I mean, like I said, I did a lot of reading trying to figure out if there was somebody that had kind of
Hit the magic.
addressed this.
Yeah.
I think for me, the takeaway has got to be the how more piece with intuition and gut equal judgment. It's the judgment piece. That's what we're talking about. Judgment is gut. It's intuition. It's
Well, I'd
what
say
I've
judgment
known,
is
what
your
I've-
gut, and he says that's your reading, your personality, your experience,
education.
and education.
Right.
I always
Tag
forget
team now.
one. I always forget one.
But I mean, again, I think the point being is the one you have control over, obviously, is the reading, the education, the experience, maybe the personality.
Maybe the experience.
You still have some. So let's say you're in a very slow department. You could still place yourself in the busiest station in that department.
Okay, but what
Try.
if even that was not very busy? And then you start going,
Go
well,
to
they go
class.
get training, but then that's
That's
the
education.
education.
I know.
But and then again, how important is if I've only been to 4 fires in 10 years? There's a lack of experience there,
Right.
but can I minimize it by knowing that I've only been to 4 fires and there is this
And you increase these other areas.
Well, and acknowledging there's this whole side of this that
The
I
unknown.
don't know.
Yeah, the unknown.
But if
side.
you've been to 4 fires in 10 years and you think I've got this, then yeah, you know what I mean? But the lack of experience, I'm sure there are firefighters in the country possibly listening to us.
2 of them.
Maybe of the 2. No, but I mean, there are departments where they're just not going to run the call. So getting that experience is not something they can necessarily control, even at the busiest station of the department.
Right.
But still acknowledging what you don't know is a piece of that experience.
Right.
And you minimize the effect of a lack of actual experience by saying, hey, I've seen this before, but I haven't seen it enough to say that I know what's going on.
Right.
So do you get a pass on your judgment when you mess up?
Well, I'd say the pass on judgment is really more, are you the best person there at that moment to make the judgment? Because if somebody's
Versus
better
you
qualified,
are the
you may
only
not have that
person
choice.
there.
and I'm okay with that. That's where we get back to.
The pass is, and this is what I would tell people all the time, is have you done everything to prepare yourself to
Right.
make that judgment? Have you and that was always my big thing was like,
Right.
what do the Kobayashi Maru, a no-win situation, and I would give them to people, and I'd say, and they're like, well, what do you do? I'm like, the one you can live with.
Yeah.
The one that your heart can live with, because that's the judgment. That's really at the end of the day, that's what it is
What
that
have
judgment.
you done to get there?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the part I think when I say we do give kind of an answer here is you're always going to have unknowns. There's never going to be a situation where you can be omnipotent and know every situation. So you can control the development of your judgment through your experience and education and reading and all this stuff. So do that so that when you make those judgment calls, you feel more confident that you've done everything that you could do to prepare yourself to be in that spot.
Like you said, what you can live with. I did everything I could up to this point.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Yes, Bill.
Hey, no problem.
I'll bring to you some really complicated conversations.
I think that was a pretty fun conversation, though.
Yeah.
Read Hal
as
Moore.
is our tradition. I don't know that we've solved anything. Yeah. Read Hal Moore, read Colin Powell, read. And again, I mean,
If not read, listen to Audible.
Yeah. There's so many different ways that you can get that information.
I think you get more retention out of reading and probably a little bit more depth because you can kind of pause.
But the convenience.
The convenience of the downtime on the commute or while you're doing a menial task or raking leaves or whatever, listen to a podcast is really, really awesome. Do it a lot. Like if you're at the gym, just, on the treadmill or on the elliptical, instead of watching a movie or watching TV, listen to a podcast or listen to a book.
Always Murder podcast.
Do it always a murder cop?
Yeah, that's the Ted Lasso. Remember, Rory?
Yeah.
Podcast. Always Murder podcast.
Always Murder podcast.
That's when he's getting the massage.
Yeah.
Yeah. We still need to do a whole thing on Ted Lasso.
Oh, yeah. That was such a gym find there. I mean,
no kidding.
I watched it that one time. I was like, wait a minute. What
are
this
they
show?
When you asked me whether I'd seen it, and I was like, no, I'm not watching that.
Oh.
Yeah, big mistake.
Yeah, that show was awesome.
That's like the best show at like the house. You're not sure if something needs to be on, man, throw that thing on. It doesn't even matter what episode you throw it on.
And it's when I put it on, my sons will come and sit down and watch, which is pretty awesome because it just draws them in.
Great show.
So, all right. Well.
Combustible is available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Amazon, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to Combustible to make sure you don't miss out on an episode. Follow us on Facebook so we know how many of you listeners there are out there. And you can check us out online at combustiblethepodcast.com. As always, we would like to thank the Golden Dogs and True North Records for letting us use their song Saints at the Gates for our theme music. You can find the Golden Dogs music on any streaming platform. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.